across the region towards climate action and marine protected area management. We hope that through these series of online regional exchanges that highlight successful women-led initiatives in marine resource management and ocean protection, we are able to show how we are connected and our shared efforts contribute to each other's. So I'd like to welcome Ibu Alda Sousa Lemos da Rosa. If she's online, can you confirm, Blair?
She's not online yet. We can proceed with the next speaker.
Okay, well noted. We will await Ibu Alda's participation online. So we will proceed with the welcome remarks from CTI-CFF Executive Director, Dr. Bushari, that will be delivered by Mr. Gustav Liumiu, the Deputy Executive Director for Corporate Services at the CTI-CFF Regional Secretariat based in Manado. Mr. Liumiu has more than 35 years of experience working in international development assistance program for Indonesia and was responsible in fiscal management and reporting of bilateral and multilateral programs. Prior to his role at the CTI-CFF, he was the finance assistant for the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta and was the finance director of the Indonesian Biodiversity Foundation, Kahati. Mr. Gustav, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ibrahim. So, regards from Dr. Koshari. He could not attend this webinar since he is in the Egypt to participate in the COP27 there. So he tasked me to deliver this opening remark from the CTI-CFF. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished representatives from CTI-CFF Women Leaders Forum, our CTI-CFF long-standing partner USAID, our project partners and organizer of this seminar, dear participants and particular ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor for me to be here on the occasion of the official opening of this Session 2 Coral Triangle Women Leaders Kickstarting Climate Action and Ocean Protection towards the 30x30 goal. Let me express my most sincere thanks to the organizer for inviting me to deliver a few remarks at this auspicious occasion. First and foremost, allow me to provide some background of the CTI-CFF role of women on this current issue of climate change and ocean protection, when the roles of women have to be there. Our planet, we know it is under threat from human-caused greenhouse gas emission to the overexploitation of the Earth's natural resources. Unsustainable production and consumption patterns pose a risk to all of the humanity. The Coral Triangle Initiative is 6 million square kilometers in size, spanning on the waters of Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, the Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste. The Coral Triangle has the highest coral and reefs fish diversity globally and provides vital spawning grounds for whales, turtles, and other charismatic species. And 1/3 of the people depend on these waters for their livelihood as well. These abundant and valuable marine and coastal resources are under threat from unsustainable fishing and the effect of climate change. The negative impact of climate change disproportionately affects women and girls. This is not due to the inherent vulnerability, but the result of gender inequalities in the political, social, and economic realms that intersect with other axes of social disadvantages. We all know that women are the agent of change as early adopters of new agriculture techniques, first responders in crisis, entrepreneurs of green energy, or decision makers at home. We also know that when women are well represented in the decision-making processes, their ability to share skills and knowledge strengthens our collective effort to face the challenges of climate change, as said by Mrs. Pranjivan Sam. At the COP26 Climate Summit, the leader of Estonia, Tanzania, Bangladesh were the first to sign the Glasgow Women's Leader Statement, calling for countries to support the leadership of women and girls on climate action at all levels of society and politics. The action of women is key part of reaching Sustainable Development Goal 14, life underwater. At the United Nations Ocean Conference from 5 to 9 June in New York this year, an event on day one will showcase women's action and strategies for including women ocean management. A research done by and collected by Harvard Business Review, this research showed that women outscore men on most leadership competencies. According to analysis of 30-60 degrees reviews during the pandemic, women were rated higher on most competencies such as this takes initiative, learning agility, inspires and motivate others, develop others, build relationship, display high integrity and honesty down up to establishes stretch goals and develop strategies, perspective, techniques, and professional expertise. Women are outscores of men. During the 10th Senior Officers meeting and 5th Ministerial meeting in Manado, Indonesia in May 2014, the CTI-CFF called upon Coral Triangle countries to actively engage and incorporate the perspectives of women and girls towards achieving its regional and national plan of action goal and targets through the CTI-CFF Women Leaders Forum. The CTI-CFF encourages all its bodies and its 6 member countries to clearly demonstrate their engagement with the reflect upon the role of women and girls as stakeholders in CTI activities and document this action to provide testament to and serve as a model for gender integration. Ladies and gentlemen, actually only me as a gentleman, if not wrong, sorry, correct me. The CTI-CFF Regional Secretariat in collaboration with Coral Triangle Center, CTC, and the Nature Conservancy aim to shine a spotlight on innovation and action undertaken by women leaders across the region in sustaining marine resources through a series of 2 online regional exchanges that highlight successful women-led initiatives in marine resources management and ocean protection. This initiative focused on biodiversity protection, climate action, and marine protected area management linked to the global goal to protect 30% of the world's ocean by 2030. This series of 2 hours webinars today and regional exchange aim to inspire others to take similar action for ocean revitalization and document lessons learned amongst women conservation practitioners across the Coral Triangle. The learning exchange aimed to reach 50 to 100 virtual participants for each session from the Coral Triangle countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, PNG, Philippines, Solomon Islands, and Timor-Leste. We do hope that these webinars will produce more cooperative ideas and thoughts in terms of implementation of CTI-CFF and activities concerning the factor of gender-related issue in Coral Triangle region. I wish you all a most productive and successful discussion. Thank you very much. Good morning again to all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gustav, for your inspiring welcome remarks. We very much appreciate it. And we look forward to continue with the Regional Secretariat to further strengthen the Women Leaders Forum that is now expanding and also helped endorse an gender equality social inclusion policy for the Coral Triangle initiative. So thank you so much, Dr. Gustav, and we hope you can stay engaged with us during this
You're
webinar.
welcome. Yeah, you're welcome, Ibu.
Thank you. I think Dr. Alda is not yet online, so we proceed with a very short presentation to help set the stage for the discussion. Lei, can you put up? Yeah. Okay, so just to help set the stage in a very short PowerPoint about the Coral Triangle, which is widely recognized now as the bullseye for marine biodiversity, including 6 countries: Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. And the dark red area is delineating the boundaries of the Coral Triangle, which is a core area to help replenish coral reefs around the globe. And it's a crucial refuge for our genetic pool for coral species around the world. Next, please. But of course, under threat, very much from illegal fishing, overfishing, and destructive fishing practices, plastic pollution and marine debris, climate change, but also from under-controlled development on the coast, resulting in a lot of sedimentation and physical destruction. And it's really in that social context where millions of people depending on those resources that we try to find a balance between conservation and sustainable development. Next, please. So, of course, last year, this very alarming report came out, produced by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. And I recall the comment from the UN Secretary, it's the Red Code for Humanity. And we see the direct impacts of climate change in terms of extreme heat waves, drought and floods, extreme temperatures. And it's really the human behavior that we need to control to really address climate change issues. And especially when we look at it globally, local efforts become also so important to showcase that we can do and achieve results on the ground together. Next, please. It's also more and more embraced the post CBD 20 frame in the context of the CBD post 20 framework, that we do need to address the protection of marine biodiversity, and that we do need to increase the protection level. And more countries are committed now to help set aside 30% of the oceans by 2030, and especially to focus on the management effectiveness of these MPAs, because so many MPAs are still ineffective when it comes to protecting coastal and marine resources effectively. And it's our hope that with these global forums, more and more attention will be placed on the protection of this 30% for the oceans. Next, please. And very quickly, CTC, we are a non-profit organization based in Indonesia, and our mission is to inspire and train generations to care for coastal and marine ecosystems and help build up local capacity for long-term marine conservation. Next, please. So we train local governments, communities, NGOs. We engage with local universities as well, and international partners to develop very practical training modules that will support our stakeholders in caring for the oceans. And the training ranges from developing MPA management plans to, no, just go ahead. Yeah. Next slide, please.
but also monitoring the coral reefs or engaging local communities. To date, we have 26 practical training modules developed with partners and almost trained 6,000 people across the Coral Triangle. Next, please. And we support also marine protected areas on the ground. We have 5 sites in Indonesia, and we support 2 sites also in Timor-Leste, covering 387,000 hectares of critical marine habitats. Next, please. Now, the Women Leaders Forum was established in 2014. We facilitated this forum with support from USAID RDMA at the time. And it's really a peer learning network for women who are playing a key role in sustaining the marine resources of the Coral Triangle region. It's also a very important platform to build the capacity of women to take leadership roles in preserving and sustaining the region's unique marine and coastal resources. And it's a great platform also to recognize the role and their commitment to marine conservation as well. Next, please. And one of the key activities we supported was the development of an intergenerational leadership learning program where we connected teams in each country, senior official or representative of an NGO with a junior colleague, and they received leadership training and a conservation challenge to implement it on the ground. And in that context, they demonstrated their leadership, but also could scale up their work in each of their respective countries in marine conservation. And the leadership program, that training module, is now available for each of the countries to further institutionalize and implement it in the Coral Triangle countries. Next, please. And in Indonesia, we empower women in Indonesia's coastal communities. Some examples: the women who are working in the blue swimming crab fisheries in Lampung. We help a group of women in Nusa Penida, offshore Bali, in seaweed processing activities. And we supported women in sustainable seafood businesses and fishing communities in Maluku, in the K Islands, and Merauke in Papua. Next, please. And this is just an example of the women in the blue swimming crab fisheries in Lampung, where we work with Photo Voice International to help them to visualize also the work that they do, but also highlight key issues in their village to raise that with the local government and set up an exhibition. And it was very successful in that some of the issues were also adopted by the local government, and hopefully there will be more follow-up in terms of resources to address those issues. Next, please. So these were just some examples of how women leaders play a pivotal role in supporting marine conservation, but also to help scale up their activities through peer learning networks and sharing lessons learned. So we look forward to the speakers today to share their experiences in this field. And I'd like to introduce in this context our first speaker, Dr. Lizzie McLeod. She's the Nature Conservancy's Global Reef Systems Lead, and in this capacity, she provides strategic leadership of their global reef team to implement priority science, policy management strategies, communications, and fundraising efforts to elevate and scale up TNC's coral and shellfish reefs around the world. Lizzie is passionate about building local leadership to achieve global impact. She has spent over 2 decades developing and implementing strategies to reduce the impacts of climate change on marine ecosystems and coastal communities, and has led the development tools to improve reef management. She was instrumental in designing TNC's Reef Resilience Toolkit and trainings, which have trained over 35,000 reef managers in over 83% of the world's coral reef nations on the best practices for addressing threats to coral reefs. In her prior role, Lizzie served as a climate scientist for the Pacific Division. So thanks so much, Lizzie, for joining us today and sharing your welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maylee. I really appreciate it. It's just an honor to be here with you all tonight. For me, and I'm in Virginia now, morning for you all. I just wanted to start by saying, no matter where we live, oceans are absolutely essential to our lives. We have the oceans to thank for every second breath we take. They provide food and income for over 3 billion people. And our coral reefs and wetlands shelter marine life, and they protect our shorelines, breaking up wave energy and reducing storm surge, protecting coastal communities around the world. The Nature Conservancy is working with partners like CTC and CTI, CFF, and others around the world to protect 30% of our oceans over the next decade. And we do this by supporting marine protected areas, innovative financing, restoration, fisheries management, aquaculture, blue carbon, and helping communities adapt to climate change, specifically using nature-based solutions. Globally, the Nature Conservancy has made some really significant advancements in women's leadership. I am so proud that we now have a phenomenal woman CEO, Jen Morris, who's leading our organization. She's an inspirational leader, and she inspires us and ensures that we're living our values as an organization as we work together to try to create a future where nature and people thrive. But we also have some phenomenal leaders in our Asia Pacific division. One you're going to be hearing from in a minute, Maz Manawavi, who works in our Papua New Guinea program, and she's been leading some really innovative projects to engage women's leadership in mangrove conservation and restoration. And actually, our Asia Pacific region has been key in leading progress for our entire organization in better integrating gender into our conservation work, but specifically in our ocean and climate work. So a key priority to ensure that we're able to mainstream gender across our conservation work is making sure that we have staff with the right skill sets. And often these skills aren't always found in conservation organizations. Skills like being able to conduct a gender analysis, or a gender action plan where you're identifying goals that consider gender equity and outcomes for women and girls, making sure that we're monitoring, evaluating, and reporting on gender-related outcomes. This is incredibly important in conservation, but it's especially important in the ocean and climate space. This is because women's voices are often not represented in climate projects, literature, and discourse. And when we exclude their input, we come up with projects that are less robust, that are less equitable, but that significantly they miss the power of the contributions that women make. They miss the valuable knowledge that women bring based on their own life experiences, or perhaps it's their work experiences harvesting, processing, or selling marine resources, or their experiences adapting to climate change over multiple generations. So I wanted to just speak briefly. When I started my career at the Nature Conservancy, this was 20 years ago in Asia Pacific. Actually, Reilly was working for TNC back then, running our oceans program in Indonesia. And I was working on climate and ocean projects. And at the time, I thought I had a fairly robust understanding of climate change impacts. Sea level rise leading to flooding and erosion, increasing ocean temperatures, increasing storms that wreak havoc on coastal communities and ecosystems, changing patterns of precipitation that lead to flooding and coastal erosion and droughts, and salt water coming into groundwater and gardens. But a couple of years ago, I led a women's exchange in the Pacific, bringing women together from across the region. And I realized after that meeting that I had some really significant blind spots. Because at that meeting, I heard for the first time about how climate change was affecting women and girls differently. One woman shared that during periods of drought, when there's not enough water to do laundry or a woman's not able to cook for her husband, she can end up experiencing violence from her partner. I also heard that during drought, sometimes the schools have to close because there's no water to prepare food for the children or to flush the toilets, and they miss out on education. Or sometimes girls have to walk farther. Young girls walk to neighboring villages to get water for their families, and they can become victims of violence. So I started doing research and digging into how climate is affecting women and girls differently. And I started to see that there are patterns of violence that often follow natural disasters and climate change. One example, there was a back-to-back tropical storms on a Pacific island, and there was a 300% increase in domestic violence following the storm. The same thing happens around the world after hurricanes. The same thing happened after COVID across countries around the world. But also through my work, I've learned about how women are rising up to lead their communities in ocean and climate action. I met an incredible woman named Bernadette Kadongan from an island of Yap in Micronesia. Bernadette came to this women's learning exchange that we held, where she learned about projects that were happening in Papua New Guinea, where women were actually experimenting with new techniques for improving soil fertility and new technologies for using drought tolerant and salt tolerant crops that were better able to cope with climate change. Bernadette goes back home to her community in Yap and was asked to present what she had learned to her traditional leaders. And she shared her experiences and her idea to develop a community garden with resilient crops that would support her community with food that could survive climate change impacts, but also that would provide valuable sources of income for women in her community. She secured a grant from the Nature Conservancy and from the local chiefs to develop her project. And then she received another grant from her government to scale her project even larger, and it's now spreading to neighboring villages throughout the region. So through these examples, I came to really appreciate the power of women coming together in learning exchanges. My hope is that through hearing the incredible stories of women from across the Coral Triangle, that you will be inspired to share their lessons in your own communities, to pilot your own projects so that we can secure a future for our children and our children's children. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And now we're going to hear a short video from Virginie from Mary Kay, who is one of our wonderful supporters, helping to save our oceans, but also critically helping to support our work to ensure that women are leading the charge. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Lizzie. Great sharing of your personal experience also, and seeing firsthand the power of women on the ground and how they actually scale up and share their experiences across the region. Thanks so much for that. And we can continue indeed with Virginie's video. We do have Ibu Alda here with us, and may I invite her first to deliver her welcome remarks. The chair of the CTI Women Leaders Forum and a member of Timor-Leste CTI CFF National Coordinating Committee. Alda is also the chief of the Department of Investigation and Development of the Department of Fisheries and Agriculture in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries in Timor-Leste. Ibu Alda has been actively involved in the CTI CFF Women Leaders Forum since 2017. One of her projects is the successful women-led waste management program in the Ottawa Island MPA in Timor-Leste. Thank you so much, Ibu Alda, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Rili. Good morning, everyone. Apologize for my late because internet connection and technical something like that. So I will starting for today. It's I will just welcome remarks to everything today because I have another meeting with minister, and I just speak just to welcome remarks. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, speakers and participants to this virtual learning exchange. I am honored to deliver the welcome remarks to this very important session and topic that we are discussing today. As chair of the CTI CFF Women Leaders Forum, I'm welcome of all of you here today. Globally, and most importantly, in the Coral Triangle, climate change poses a serious threat to the health of the oceans. The oceans covers 71% of our planet surface and has observed the impact of global temperature increases. It has taken in around 25% of the carbon emission and nearly 90% of the heat produced by rising greenhouse gas emissions trapped in the Earth's atmospheres, raising the risk to the lives and livelihoods of coastal residents, as well as ocean and coastal ecosystems. There is an urgent need to protect our oceans, not only for its role in helping regulate our climate, but for the many benefits it provides to us. While these challenges may seem too large, many individuals, such as the ones that we are going to hear from today, develop and implement solutions to address the issues affected by our changing seas. It's very inspiring to see and listen to our women leaders in the Coral Triangle who are leading the way in climate action and ocean protections. We hope that we can learn from their presentations today and be inspired to take action in our areas. I would like to thank CTC, TNC, and CTICF Regional Secretariat for organizing this virtual learning exchange. We hope that our women leaders continue to shine bright and they continue their work in contribution to our shared global commitment to protect and sustain our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ibu Alda, for your welcome remarks. And we very much appreciate your time joining this webinar. I hope you can still stay for some of the very inspiring speakers and videos that we will see and hear today. And Timor-Leste is also, providing great examples actually of women leaders, particularly in Atauro Island, as you mentioned, and how they help manage or recycle plastics on the island and inspire other islands to do the same. So thank you, Alda. And we will proceed now with the video that Lizzie was referring to from Virginie. She is the global head of sustainability and social impact at Mary Kay's global headquarters in Dallas, Texas, US. Virginie also leads the Women's Empowerment and Equality, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Global Advocacy, Post-Marketing, and Community Investment for Mary Kay. She also contributes to shaping the global grant-giving strategy for the Mary Kay Ash Foundation, whose twofold mission is to help find cures for cancers affecting women and to eradicate domestic and gender-based violence. Since 2019, Virginie has committed to advancing the Women's Entrepreneurship Accelerator by collaborating with 6 UN agency partners and several advocacy partners, such as the Big Empower UN SDG Challenge and Commonwealth Business Women's Network. So we look forward to see the video and Virginie's remarks to our audience today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Virginie Naijan-Malek, Global Head of Sustainability and Social Impact for Mary Kay Inc. I'm thrilled to participate in this event in collaboration with the Coral Triangle Center, the Nature Conservancy, and the CTI-CFF Regional Secretariat. Mary Kay was founded in 1963 with one goal: enriching women's lives. Our focus on conservation and sustainability is a foundational value. Our founder, Mary Kay Ash, once said, "I feel very strongly that we must do everything in our power to save our planet." Mary Kay has environmental commitments because we strongly feel it is the right thing to do. We believe preserving our planet is the only way forward to ensure a sustainable future. Mary Kay's global sustainability strategy, Enriching Lives Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, offers a holistic approach that encompasses the 3 dimensions of sustainability: economic, environmental, and social, through 5 pillars activated by 15 commitments to deliver a decade of sustainable action. A key component of tackling climate change and achieving the SDGs is ocean action. The ocean covers 70% of the Earth. It is the planet's largest biosphere and is home to up to 80% of all life in the world. As you all know, The Coral Triangle is the international heart of coral reefs and the lifeline of our ocean. The world's coral reefs have reached a crisis point. In the last 3 decades, we have lost more than a half of the world's corals, and scientists estimate that if we continue with business as usual, 90% of coral reefs could be gone. Mary Kay understands any threat to the health of our ocean is an existential threat to us all, and we are committed to working with other leaders in this space to make a difference. TNC has created impactful conservation initiatives that elevate women-led programs in the Coral Triangle and across the globe. We know that we cannot compartmentalize sustainable development as only an environmental issue. Mary Kay is committed to being a good steward of our natural resources, while fostering gender equality and women's empowerment in conservation. Our support of ocean work reflects the legacy of action Mary Kay has been building for nearly 60 years. Mary Kay celebrates the work we and others on this panel have done to invest in our planet and protect our oceans, a resource which sustains the livelihood of about 3 billion people worldwide. Through strategic local community-based conservation, we as a global community can safeguard the planet's remaining coral reefs and work toward a healthy, thriving ocean for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginie. Very inspiring to hear her remarks and also the global commitment of Mary Kay to support the Women Leaders Initiative around the globe. That was great. And I'm very pleased now that we can continue to introduce the other speakers in our webinar. So the first speaker from the Coral Triangle countries is from Papua New Guinea. Her name is Mazela Manibaki, and considered Papua New Guinea's first female specialist in the field of mangrove restoration and conservation. Mazela's love for the environment and oceans goes back to her childhood years, growing up with her 2 siblings at Motopura Island Research Center in Woodless Bay, Central Province, where her father was stationed as a marine biologist. She completed her Bachelor of Science honors degree in marine biology, specializing in mangrove conservation at the University of Papua New Guinea, and a Master of Science in marine biology and ecology at James Cook University, Australia. Mazela built on her childhood knowledge and her formal education to produce the community-based mangrove planting handbook, a step-by-step guide to implement a mangrove rehabilitation project for the coastal communities of Papua New Guinea. Mazela is now working full-time with TNC as mangrove scientist leading the Mangora Market Value Program. So thank you, Mazela, for being with us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Tabay Namona is good morning in Port Moresby, where where TNC is currently located, Papua New Guinea, and it's a privilege to be here this morning to speak to this panel, and thank you for all the wonderful participants also who have joined, and I hope that this session, as I speak more a little bit about our project, you will be inspired to be involved in your mangrove conservation work. So as the speaker has introduced me, I work as the mangrove scientist for the program Mangoro Market Mary, and it is based out of Papua New Guinea. And I lead most of the science and research work relating to mangrove conservation. So just a little bit of background on the Mangoro Market Mary program. This is a women-led project, and it serves as it focuses on achieving 3 main objectives. First of all, generally looking at empowering women to do mangrove conservation through achieving 3 main objectives, which are biodiversity conservation, climate change adaptation and mitigation, and of course, sustainable livelihoods. So I will speak a little bit more about our blue carbon project efforts and mangrove restoration work in 2 sites in Papua New Guinea. I came into the Nature Conservancy 2 years ago with the knowledge that women are highly dependent in any Melanesian society on the vital services that mangrove ecosystems provide. And this is generally the case for all Pacific communities. And one of the things that stood out most from our work in the last 3 years is looking closely at, what are the resources that women extract from mangrove forests. And we've come to learn that a lot of income that women depend on from receiving from mangroves is from mud crabs and fish and firewood and shellfish. So the Mangrove Market Merit program, its major objective is equity and conservation and linking women to markets from the mangrove resources. I focus more on leading the science and research work of mangrove conservation, and I will give a little bit more background on what we are currently doing in terms of the innovative research into blue carbon and mangrove restoration. In any Melanesian society, and particularly in Papua New Guinea, if you look at the population in a community that's dependent on the mangrove ecosystem and highly utilize the mangrove ecosystem, it will be the highest percentage will probably be say 70 to 90% of women compared to other groups in our community. However, in our program in the last 3 years, we have come to realize or have found out in our recent surveys that women are not directly involved in any decision making around the utilization of resources, whether it be for their use or for the conservation. And so the idea of Mangrove Market Merit came about in empowering women to do conservation through linking them to markets. So in any community where in PNG, for instance, is 90% of the population is dependent on their rural population is dependent on their natural resources for sustenance. Doing conservation can be a very challenging thing. And one of the things is that trying to find an alternative, trying to do the conservation work and at the same time allowing women and communities to access their resources to sustain their livelihoods. So we have been working in 2 communities which cover about 1,000 hectares of forest. When we started off this work, we wanted to look at one of our major objectives was to link women to markets from their mud crabs. Mud crabs are a very, very great delicacy in Papua New Guinea and sell at a good price. And most of the communities that you go to that are linked directly to urban communities, urban centers or towns fetch a really good price for the mud crabs. So in our current work, we're looking at linking women to premium markets, linking them directly to these premium markets for the mud crabs. One of the major objectives as well is to look at how do we engage women in blue carbon markets, because from our learnings from the RED Plus projects in Papua New Guinea, there is no equitable benefit sharing when it comes to the harvesting of resources or commercialization of resources. So we started off last year just looking at doing a situation analysis on what the RED Plus policy was all about and looking at the potential of including blue carbon in that space. One of the major findings that we came across was that there is nothing at all in the benefit sharing mechanism under RED Plus, which includes mangroves for Papua New Guinea, looking closely at how resources or funds coming for RED Plus projects are equitably distributed among women. So those are one of the major findings that we did this study, and it's one of the first of its kind in Papua New Guinea to provide really a scope or overview of what is missing in the RED Plus policy, but also what is the potential for inclusion of blue carbon. We are also leading some of the big situation analysis around mangrove policy and blue carbon policies in PNG. These are consultations that we do, large scale consultations with different sectors in Papua New Guinea to ensure that research data is available to inform how these policies are generated to include women in terms of the benefit sharing and in conservation decisions. That is a little bit of background on our blue carbon project. Currently, we are looking at 1,000 hectares, as I mentioned, of forest. We recently conducted a biodiversity survey and the first blue carbon assessment in Papua New Guinea. This is a project that was led by our team with Mangrove Market Mary and a community which comprised of 100 individuals, 50% of which comprised women who were trained by our MMM program to carry out biodiversity surveys, blue carbon stock assessments, participatory surveys at the community level. So that's what we have conducted in the last 4 months. This data is quite critical because it will be the first data in Papua New Guinea to have some valuation of carbon value for mangroves. And this is innovative research that we've been leading as well. We're also looking at mangrove restoration in one of our pilot sites where we will be piloting blue carbon in a mangrove restoration site. One of the things that we will be conducting in the next month or so is doing a blue carbon assessment in a 3 to 5, say 3 hectares, that's 3 football fields of degraded mangrove area. In our site called Dogura, which is in Central Province, we have a total mangrove area of 100 hectares, 5 hectares of which we've identified as degraded mangrove forest. In the 3 hectares that we are focusing most of our research work around, you have the biggest threat in this particular area from bloodworm harvesting. So these are bloodworms are a big demand for fish bait, and they're located 1 to 5 meters underneath the mangrove, spider mangrove trees, or mangroves, the Rhizophora mangrove, which have stilt roots. So what has been happening in this site in the last 15 years, where locals have been cutting the roots of mangroves in order to dig 1.5 meters down to access bait. And this bait is really on high demand because one bloodworm can, when you fish with one bloodworm, you can catch at least 4 fish on one bloodworm, which is about, say, 30 meters long. So these are some of the things that we've been finding out from this site, is that it's quite significant because it's different from all the areas around Papua New Guinea, where you have major threats from cutting firewood, coastal development, as I mentioned, firewood harvesting. We also have like unsustainable harvesting of mud crabs or shellfish, particularly by women. So the bloodworm is also harvested by women in this particular area that we're working in, while we are doing some research around how to provide alternatives for these communities. We are doing some groundbreaking research which will contribute to successful restoration in Papua New Guinea. And that is in the book that was mentioned earlier in mangrove restoration, we are going to be implementing 3 different techniques for planting mangroves in a open mangrove area. So this is this particular area that I am speaking particularly about 3 hectares degraded forest. It has the soil dynamics of the area has completely changed. There has been no natural recruitment at all. It is a very open area, and seedlings that have been planted in the past have very, very high mortality. So one of the innovative research that we are currently doing now is testing 3 different techniques and looking at what technique can be successful to increase survival. And this will be replicated. This will be covered in about 60 say 200 hectares, 200 square meters, and then once we get the results of this next year, we'll be able to replicate the method that increases the survival across the 3 hectares forest that we're planting. And so this is one of the research that we're really excited to implement. And this is led by women because we currently are establishing a ranger program, which will involve at least 100% youths and women, mothers from the community. And this ranger program is looking at empowering women and youths in equipping them with skills on basic mangrove ecology, but also doing a monitoring of this site where we plan to do replanting. Our restoration efforts is looking at about 100 to 500 seedlings, 500,000 seedlings in the next 5 to 10 years. And then we'll be monitoring the carbon content changes in this forest, as well as measuring the success against the techniques that we'll be testing. So I hope that our research will contribute to mangrove restoration success in Papua New Guinea. And also our blue carbon work will be providing the first quantitative data to the Office of, the Climate Change and Development Authority to include in our next round of nationally determined contributions. I think I will stop there. I came to this presentation now without a PowerPoint, but I'd like to provide just this background so that it shows something that we are doing in Papua New Guinea that can be inspiring in the Pacific, that we are leading this mangrove restoration work in Papua New Guinea, empowering women to do this work, but also looking more closely at blue carbon, which is a vital thing to look at, especially with climate change being a major issue in the Pacific as well. Thank you very much. I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Marcella, for your excellent presentation. It's great to hear about the women to work towards a more equitable distribution of benefits, and also engage them in the whole blue carbon process. As we all know, mangroves play a pivotal role also in carbon sequestration. So this was great. And I'd like to encourage our audience to, if you have any questions for Marcella, please put them in the chat box and we can then refer back to them later. Thank you, Marcella. Very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is actually, it's more about the efforts of Waifuna in Papua, Indonesia. It's a video presentation about the first women-led SASI in Raja Ampat, West Papua, Indonesia. And just some background, in the coastal regions of Indonesia, SASI temporary closures are leveraged by local communities to prevent overharvesting of marine resources. SASI are historically managed by men. However, the late Betsina Hay, a local woman and wife of a village leader in West Misol in Raja Ampat, sought to bring more equity to marine resource management and began advocating for a woman-led SASI. In 2008, thanks to Hay's efforts and influential position in her village, the women's group Waifuna was granted a SASI, representing a true first in Papua history. The women's ownership rights were fully acknowledged by the sub-village government, church, and adult holders. And TNC partnered with Waifuna to provide training around ecological assessments and monitoring to ensure successful management of the SASI. Please proceed with the video. Thank you.
Pun Now del yom yam line ambuka sasi pokalimo malang pon fapore. Sasi itu seperti tabungan atau seperti tabungan yang kita nabung di bank begitu. Kalau sasi berarti daerah yang sasi itu kalau kita di Kapacol, kalau sudah tempat di sasi itu segala jenis apa yang ada termasuk ikan juga kita tidak ambil. Seperti itu kima itu juga kita tidak ambil lagi. Karena itu dia ada di dalam tempat sasi. Harapan saya ke depan agar tempat sasi kami selalu dijaga, juga dilindungi oleh Yang Maha Kuasa, juga kepada kami manusia atau manusia yang adalah yang selalu menjaga lingkungan agar tidak ada yang datang dengan komprenso atau potes atau membom di sekitar tempat sasi kami.
Wonderful. Such a great, inspiring video of the Waifua group in Raja Ampat, West Papua. I don't know if there's someone here from TNC or Yekan who would like to elaborate a bit more on this in person. Okay. If not, we can proceed to the next speaker today. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Hesti Widodo. She's the Senior Program Manager of the Coral Triangle Center, and she will present on building capacity in Indonesia to support the Global 30 by 30 goal through MPA effectiveness. She develops CTC's curricula and ensures that CTC's training modules to meet the needs for capacity development in the field of marine and coastal management. The work covers monitoring and evaluating capacity development activities and regular assessments of potential needs for new course development. Hesti's background include marine science, social marketing, and environmental social science. She is involved in developing a socio-economic monitoring standard focusing on the way local communities perceive the establishment and management of marine protected areas. She has a PhD on coastal resources management from the Diponegoro University in Indonesia. She also holds a master's in environmental social science from the University of Anglia in the UK and a master's degree in international marketing from Gajah Mada University in Indonesia. So Hesti, we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu. I'll turn off my video for this presentation just to make connection better. Good morning, everybody. I'm Hesti Widodo. Pleased to join this discussions today and sharing the lessons among the women in the Coral Triangle. I will start the presentation on looking at the global context for achieving 30 by 30 targets, in which marine protected area has been highlighted as one important tool to conserve and sustain biodiversity, as stated in target of 10 by 10, 10 by 20, which is grows now into the 30. Now, looking at this picture here, the global goal for nature can be measured through the 3 measurable objectives, which is the first one is zero net loss, which can be attained by 2020, and net positive by 2030, and it is expected by 2050, full recovery of biodiversity can be achieved. And looking at the marine protected areas in the world, some studies has been looking at 2,688 MPAs around the globe, that not every MPAs are able to deliver the conservation promise. and only 7% of them are effectively managed and able to protect coral reefs. The government in Indonesia, in collaboration with partners, developed a document of MPA Vision 2030, in which there are two key strategies looking at expanding the MPA to 30.5 million hectares by 2030, but also looking the 20 million hectares effectively managed by 2030. This is the latest target of Indonesian government by this year is actually to achieve 30% area, coastal marine area conserved. By doing this, it is expected 40% of the coral reefs are protected in marine protected area. HR, the human resources, competency, and capacity building is highlighted over time as pillar to achieve actively managed MPA. If you look at this roadmap of the 2020-2024, the closest one to us, there are 7 key strategies to achieve MPA Vision 2030, namely integration of planning and budgeting, HR competency and capacity building, strengthening policy framework, utilization, sustainable financing, looking at the other effectively conserved marine measured area, and also sustainable financing and funding. And HR capacity building is actually quite pillars to be able to deliver to achieve some of the target. And in Indonesia, for your information, that the nature of marine resources are fully governed by the government. There are ministries implies in this governance type, including Ministry Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Ministry Home Affairs, and Ministry Environment and Forestry. In 2020, CTC and also with other partners working the Ministry of Marine Affairs to develop the document MPA Vision and Roadmap to MPA Management. But also we try to find out what kind of core competency needed for the MPA personnel to be able to support the MPA management to achieve the management effectiveness, and how this one is actually embedded with the process for evaluating management effectiveness through the EFICA, the new MPA management effectiveness tool, in which human resources and the competency of human resources of the MPA management unit are included in an input component. For information also, this one in Indonesia, we have clear steps how to develop a marine protected area based on Indonesia Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries regulation. The yellow part is actually in which the community can be part in the development of MPA. And the blue part is actually showing the personnel of MPA management driving the process for managing day-to-day of the MPA. So before the MPA is actually enacted, the role of community is very important to support through the public consultation and socialization, but also this is related to the future investment of the management, MPA management, to reduce the violation and to get support for voluntary work of the community living in the area. Looking at the target for 30.5 million hectares MPA by 2030, we realize that there are key factors to make it happen. The first one, to make sure the MPA management body is actually developed or existed, but also it is supported by key competent personnel, but also sufficient number of personnel. And also we need to have supportive community to run the management of the MPA better. Looking at this in Indonesia, there are 2 key structures of MPA management. The first one managed by the national government. The second one is actually managed by provincial government. And to date, in Indonesia, there are 97 MPA, 17 sanctuary, and also 2 maritime marine area. These 3 type of the MPAs are signifying number of achievement of Indonesia to achieve 27 million hectares by this November. But then the problem is actually numbers of MPA management unit personnel that assigned for the MPA. Looking at this, the map, this is the map of Indonesia showing we've done this assessment, looking at the MPA personnel working in the national managed government MPA and also working the provincial managed MPA. Actually, when we map out, we find out 508 people are still lacking in terms of their competency related to MPA establishment and management. only few of them are having the competency and certified. Looking at also the management, the ideal management structure of the marine protected area, there are 9 functions need to fill. And this 9 function consisting also including the biophysical monitoring, socioeconomic culture monitoring, service and partnership, surveillance, community outreach, empowerment, technology information, and also environmental impact assessment. To fill in these 9 functions, the ideal number of people per MPA management unit is actually 20%. With looking at the 116 MPAs currently in Indonesia, approximately only 348 personnel existed, which is only 15% of the ideal situation. If you look at the achievement of 10% of the marine area conserved, we will need about 15,120%. And if we look at the target for 30% of the area conserved, we will need 45,360% managing the MPA. This is a lot, and actually it requires very structure and collaboration to make it happen. And also one of the things that we identify for building the national competency qualification standard, we need to find out the learning material availability. And as you may see on the left side, this is the competency topics required for the MPA personnel. And we actually combine this research study together with the IUCN Global Standard Register for the MPA personnel. Some of the key competencies are not yet available there, and we still need to develop it. Current to date for CTC has been able to deliver, as Ibu Ruli also mentioned, 270 training sessions across the Coral Triangle. 232 sessions are running in Indonesia and 38 sessions run in the Coral Triangle. Our training participants are mostly government and community, as you can see in these charts. And 33% of the participants are female. And we also observe throughout the time, we have more and more women joining our training and learning program. To achieve the 2030, we've been doing this, some of the works together with the government and also with the Ministry Home Affairs to really doing some of the key activities, including developing the guideline for personnel HR competency development to fulfill institutional structure and professional development plan for personnel, completing professional development database. We also propose for the MPA recruitment expanding for wide skill. We need to work with this Ministry of Home Affairs for the budgeting, and we apply the propose for open recruitment system. And since 2020, CTC has been able also working with the Fisheries Extension Officer to back up for the outreach activities on the ground. And we expect by doing the overall scheme of intervention, including the competency certification qualification, we expect we'll be able to fulfill the need for strong MPA personnel and for them to be able to manage MPA effectively. That's for now. Thank you for joining, and we would looking forward to having you joining our self-paced online training at CTC Academy, and you can log in to coraltrianglecenter.org website.
Thank you so much, Hesti, for your comprehensive presentation, and really gives us a good, insight what it takes to build capacity in Indonesia to reach its 2030 goal, or setting aside 10% of its waters. And this is all part of a roadmap that we help facilitate with WWF to support the government in reaching that goal. And hopefully it will also lead to much more institutional capacity and management effectiveness of the MPAs in Indonesia. So thanks so much, Hesti Widodo, for your excellent presentation. Much appreciated. So I look forward to introduce the next speaker from the Philippines. Her name is Lilidel Pesti, or Max, speaking Poland. She's a complete ecologist with over 20 years of research and conservation. She specializes as researcher and or organizer of various interdisciplinary marine scientific research expeditions in the Kalayaan Island Group, Sulu, and South China Seas. She held both technical and project management positions in regional marine biodiversity conservation and development programs, such as the UNEP GAF South China Sea Program, the Sulawesi Seascape Program of Conservation International, the Coral Triangle Initiative CTI, and the GF World Bank Capturing Coral Reef and Ecosystem Services project. In 2010, Max co-founded the Philippine Coral Bleaching Watch, a citizen science initiative that aims to document impacts of coral bleaching in the Philippines. She's currently the resilience lead of the USAID Fish Right Program and a PhD candidate at the Marine Science Institute, University of the Philippines in Diliman. So the floor is yours, Max. We look forward to your presentation.
Hello. Thank you very much, really, for that generous introduction and for inviting me here in this forum. So the title of my presentation this morning is called Bleach Patrollers, Empowering People to See Change. People know me as Mads Kibilan, but if you encounter it, I have a fuller name. It's Milidel Christine Kibilan. And I'm the self-designated Philippine Coral Bleaching Watch Coordinator. Next slide, please. So some brief introduction about what we're about and how we started. It actually started in 2020, initially as a closed FB group of like-minded people who are interested in observing bleaching happening in the country. But in 2016, we transformed into a citizen science initiative through the Resiliencies Program of the Marine Science Institute, which was funded by our Department of Science and Technology. So from there, we created this online community that aims to map out and monitor the severity of coral bleaching and other reef stressors in the Philippines. And so projects come and go, but we've kept it going by having some pool of volunteers, keeping our social media presence active. Next slide, please. So our objectives are very simple because the Philippines is, as you know, like Indonesia has very long coastlines. We have around 26,000 kilometers of coastline. And it's impossible for only like 350 marine scientists in the country to be able to document the bleaching as it happens. So we need people, ordinary people who are closer to the water to help us document bleaching when there's a major bleaching event that's happening in the country. So we want to also, when they do identify or send out their reports, we also want them to do repeat reports of whether they're seeing some recovery or there's no recovery, so that we'll be able to gauge if these reefs are indeed resilient. And use this information to identify resistant reefs, those that you'd expect to bleach but did not, or those that are resilient, meaning those that have shown bleaching but are able to recover fast. And these are important information that provides input into MPA design, for example, or which areas should we be protecting is very important. Next slide, please. So what we do is essentially wait for the NOAA, which has really improved their forecasting of if bleaching is happening all over the world. And we re-echo that through our Facebook page, through the Bleaching Watch. And that's how this is simply, when you're a bleach patroller, you have to, put your head into the water, go diving or snorkeling, take photographs, and you make the report and report it to us through our online platforms. Next slide, please. So it's a simple form. I usually think about it like a Waze, when you do your Waze, you report something that has happened in the road. It's the same. It's just reporting to us, have you seen bleaching or not? That's the very basic information. But of course, we dive deeper. We get details of when they've seen it, how deep the water, the reef was, were they observing other things happening? Because, you could see bleaching, but it could be not thermally induced. So that's one level. And then another level, if they're more, have experience of looking at reefs, they could provide us more information as to what bleach, what life forms are bleaching, and give some estimates of that. So there are two levels there. So to structure that, before we were using forms way back, paper forms to get this information, go to the dive sites and get people to actually answer them. But then we had the app, we had the online form, which is like just the link to like a Google form. And then we've advanced it through the project that we had to fund developing a mobile app. So, but this one is only on Android now, it's on Google Play. So, you just toggle it and provide information. It's very easy to do. Next slide. So it's basically, after you've answered whether the reefs are bleaching, we need to have some estimate. So it's important to also report whether there's no bleaching happening, even if there was like an alert that should be bleaching in your area. And then it's just a scale of 1 to 5, similar to what's been used in the NOAA Coral Reef Watch. Next slide, please. So these are the types of photos that we want. They submit to us with their reports, so that we can gauge whether they were reporting more or less the scale that was important to know. Next slide, please. And then, so we consolidate this information, and then we feed back this information through our social media pages just to tell them, more or less. So if everybody's simultaneously reporting, you'd really be able to gauge through space and time where the bleaching was happening most. And like in this case, we did the 2015, 2017 big event. Bleaching wasn't happening in 2015 for us, it was happening in 2016. And it was also happening mostly on the western side of the Philippines and not everywhere else. But of course, the Philippines is also high, most of the reefs are highly degraded. So maybe the response is also very low because there's not a lot of reefs that could actually bleach. Next slide, please. In 2020, it's a proof of concept. If you have the platform, even if we're not out in the water, people were still reporting. And we've created this dashboard already so that we're almost real-time reports. So during the pandemic, we were getting reports. That year was so bad for us, and we still had the big bleaching in 2020, which will start to happen, I think, in June. So at least we were able to capture that. Next slide. On top of the bleaching, in between bleaching years, we would also get reports of bleaching, but due to crown of thorns infestation, which I think is already a very big problem in the Philippines, but not as well documented. So, but I think because of the citizen science work, that this whole Bleaching Watch app that we developed, there's now a move to now having more standard ways of also reporting crown of thorns as well. So hopefully our Department of Environment will take this on more seriously, as it is really becoming such a big problem for us in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So this is just a summary, a summary of the reports that we've been getting. The 98 one, we were using paper forms back then. In 2010, it was just our small FB group. We're not getting as much, but the 2016, we were more prepared for it. And as you can see, we were getting reports of bleaching or no bleaching between 2016 and 2020, which is very good for us. Next slide. So the next slides are just, photos of reports coming from the field of, how they were scoring it and how. These are the things that we repost in our Facebook page for others to be encouraged to report to. Yeah. Next slide. Next slide, just, some photos. This one is in Palawan. You see, in some cases, that's why we're encouraging repeat reports, because in instances, they are reporting at the peak of the bleaching that's happening, or some are at the tail end of the bleaching that's happening. So these are very important documentation of the bleaching happening in this area. So next slide, please. So yeah, this is an example of a relatively more degraded reef that you can see some corals bleaching while others were not bleaching as much. Next slide, please. This is the last of it. Yeah. Oh, so this one is the more. This is closer to Manila in Batangas, and where we found really very intense bleaching. This is also a place in the country where we've had repeat reports since 1998 of bleaching. So very interesting place to study in terms of resilience work or recovery. So this, although it looked very bad, it actually recovered well. So there. So these are just some of our sharing for this session about the Philippine coral bleaching. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Max. Very inspiring presentation and very interesting how you engage citizens in this reporting on bleaching events. And we all need those data. And so very encouraging to see this also operational in the Philippines and how you do that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And if you have any links you can share in the chat box on reports or apps that you suggested in your presentation, please share them in the chat box if you can. Thank you. So I'm also very happy to introduce our speaker from Malaysia, and she will talk about climate change impacts to fisheries and food security. Dr. Yeni Nadira Kamaruzaman from the University of Malaysia, Terengganu. She received her bachelor's degree in applied science major in fisheries from this university and a Master of Science degree in marine biology at Bangor University in UK. After her master's degree, she was an academic tutor in UMT and was offered a scholarship to pursue her PhD in ocean science at the National University in Malaysia. Dr. Yeni's master's in marine biology course in Bangor University has given her a solid background in oceanography, especially in marine environments. Her dissertation work led her to believe and to become more interested in climate change topics, especially the impact of physiological and biological change on marine ecosystems. And her PhD in ocean science with expertise in fisheries oceanography, particularly marine remote sensing and GIS. Her primary goal in fisheries oceanography is to contribute to the understanding of the oceanographic conditions on fish habitats and effects of climate change and climate variability, with primary focus on pelagic fisheries. Thank you, Dr. Yeni, for being with us here today, and we look forward to your presentation on climate change and impacts to fisheries and food security. Thank you.
Thank you, Burili, for the wonderful introductions. Okay, so Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. So today I'm the last speaker. So I'm going to talk about the climate change impact to fisheries and food security. So next slide. So as we're talking about the Coral Triangle, we know that Coral Triangle hosts an astonishing amount of marine life, and it has more coral reef diversity than anywhere else in the world. So over 2,000 different types of reef fish find refuges in these underwater gardens, and it is an important place for tuna to spawn. So every year, tuna export from Coral Triangle yield about $1 billion to the economy. So recently, more than 79% of the reef fish reproductive gatherings have stopped or declined. So therefore, without actions on climate change, coral reef in the Coral Triangle will disappear by 2100. So the ability of the region's coastal environment to feed people will decline by 80%, and the livelihood of around 100 million people will have been lost or severely impacted. So next, please. So as we all know, that the oceans is very dynamic, and nowadays we can see that the oceans around us is changing. So for example, Malaysia artisanal fishermen are beginning to suffer the impact of climate change, which include more frequent extreme weather, changes in fish availability and behavior, and rising sea levels. And meanwhile, in the waters of the Philippines, fishermen also agree that the typhoon have become more frequent and more violent due to the effect of climate change. So we know that the weather has become so unpredictable. So due to the warming of the sea, especially in the shallower coastal water, heat waves occur more frequently, which causes the coral to die. And the sea also absorbs much of additional carbon dioxide, which leads to acidification. And the ocean's content and the oxygen content in the water also decreases. So what are the causes of these changes in the oceans, and how changes affect the marine fish stocks and fisheries, and how this then affect the well-being of people, and what are the solutions to this problem? So next, please. So I hope by now we all are convinced that human activities generate greenhouse gases by burning of fossil fuels that contribute to the global warming, and that includes the oceans. So today, 30 billion tons per year of carbon dioxide is related to human activity. And one of the consequences of this is that it leads to a reduction in the amount of oxygen in the water. So also, more carbon dioxide drives climate crisis and also affect the oceans, making it 30% more acidic. So marine fish and many other marine life are very sensitive to these changing oceans conditions. So next, please. So earlier, in the IPCC report, had already identified that the Southeast Asia as among the world's most at-risk regions for extreme climate events. So tropical ecoregions in Asia, the Pacific, South America, and Africa are experiencing declining fish populations as species move further north to cooler waters and are also unable to recover due to fishing demands. So this is because climate change has caused variations in marine factors such as elevated sea surface temperature, sea level rise, pH, rainfall, ice melting at the pole, and changing in wind speed and directions. So these changes in the oceans are already affecting fish stocks and fisheries all around the world. So next, please. Okay, so one of the impact of climate change is the rise in the sea surface temperature. So climate change will cause an increase in sea surface temperature, and it will affect the distributions and the abundance of the fish populations. So especially in tropical ecoregions, the ones that feel the most impact of the global warming, and studies showed that even a slight increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius could have a catastrophic effect on the tropical nations. So the most significant impact of elevated sea surface temperature on the fish population is in the change of their distribution patterns. So temperature as small as 1 degree Celsius can have an effect on their geographical distributions. So most tropical fish have extensive latitude, range capable of further extending the temperature gradient up to 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. So the range limit may increase or decrease depending on the heat tolerances of a species. So some species may benefit from the shift toward environmental conditions outside the normal range of variability, but in most conditions, these environmental changes will change the peak fishing season and distributions of prey and prey-predator relationship. So next, please. So from my studies on the impact of elevated sea surface temperature on the distributions of the Indian mackerel, showed that at elevated temperature of 1.8 degrees Celsius would result in increased potential catch areas in the EEZ. However, if the elevated temperature increase at 2.6 and 3.3 will show that the fishing ground for the Indian mackerel would reduce, and most of the future fishing ground areas were projected to decline, and it was observed to shift outside the EEZ of South China Sea. So next, please. So also, a study from Nudin et al. Also indicated that the Indian mackerel would move to the south, heading to area with more suitable temperature. So this is because one of the fish response to temperature is changes in migration. So migration for food can also change the habitat of the pelagic fish. So as a migratory species, mackerel has the capacity to adapt quickly to environmental changes. And it is predicted to thrive along the climate change, although it has a tendency to change its migratory patterns accordingly to the feeding and the spawning areas. So this is particularly worrying because many of the countries in the tropical areas are developing countries. And we are strongly dependent on seafood for our livelihood as well as for our nutritional intake. So we also have lower capacity to deal with these changes in the oceans. So next. So what are the solutions to this problem? So I think the most effective way to deal with these challenges is to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions. So for us and everybody in our society, we can contribute by putting pressure to our government to demand actions in order to achieve what is needed to reducing the carbon emission. So right now, we have the 30 by 30 goal, which 30 by 30 refers to an effort by the global community to conserve 30% of the terrestrial and marine habitat by 2030. So apart from that, we can also change our lifestyle to more sustainable way so that we can also help reduce the overall carbon footprint of our lives. So these are also, there are also a few local actions that we can implement to buy some time before this bigger scale of carbon mitigation solutions can take their effect. So we know that by maintaining a good habitat, restoring coastal vegetations, eliminating overfishing and mitigating pollutions, we can improve the overall status of the ecosystems and fish stocks. Also, with regard to fisheries, reducing fishing pressure would be a major step to increase the capacity of fish stocks in order to adapt to the environmental changes. So this will add capacity of fish stocks and marine ecosystem to adapt and respond to the changing ocean. So effort to reduce these capture stresses are crucial in addressing this issue related to the sustainability of tropical marine fishes and ecosystem. So by taking into account the impact of climate change as one as the anthropogenic components. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yeni, for your very interesting presentation on this topic, which is so complicated and so important to study and research. And very much appreciate your sharing your insights today on I'd like to invite you to any questions. Thank you. And with the final sort of summary of this session, but also some questions that we would like to answer the panelists or the speakers today. Perhaps before we conclude the webinar, I would like to ask each of the speakers from the Philippines, from Malaysia and Indonesia. Marcella apologizes because she couldn't stay until the end of this webinar. But for those who are still here, I would like to ask the speakers, we now have all these global conferences, COP27, COP15 on climate change, ocean protection, and also the G20 here in Bali next week. So do you have any specific recommendation actually to those global forums, and especially for global leaders to consider about women leaders empowerment in the context of climate change and ocean protection, or a specific recommendation on climate change action and ocean protection based on your presentation and your working experience at the moment? So would like to ask, perhaps Hesti can first respond to this question. In what would be, a key recommendation to share at those global forums on ocean protection, climate change, and women empowerment?
Yeah, thank you, Burili. I think the most important one is actually recognizing the competency that needed for the MPA personnel, but also community. So we look at two aspects, the community and the MPA personnel, those who work in MPA management unit. But also we look at the community level in which women will be very important key aspect to support the MPA process for socializing, but also tackling some of the empowerment aspect in the community level. Our lessons from the community, from the Banda Island community, women playing very pivotal role to taking care of their environment. They also advocate for the empowerment and alternative livelihood to inspire others, and also to highlight some of the collaborative and structural way to build the capacity in such manner agreed by partners and also the government to make it advanced not only at individual or partial sectors.
Thank you so much, Hesti. A great recommendation. And I hope with this webinar, we will also have conclusions and recommendations in our report that we can share, hopefully at several forums, international forums, and across the Coral Triangle region. Thank you so much for that. May I invite Max from the Philippines? Any specific recommendation, perhaps on coral bleaching, citizen science? Thank you.
Well, yeah, well, I'm wearing two hats actually. Like right now, as mentioned earlier, I am the residency of USA program. But for the bleaching itself, the reporting, the role of women also in our communities to be able to understand what the effect of bleaching is to their fisheries, and how that affects also the fishing of their husbands, how the changes in the reef will actually impact on the way they fish, what they fish, they're able to fish. Also impacts down the road their lives and their relationships, as mentioned by Izzy earlier in her talk. But I think what we're also realizing is what is their role in building resilience. If you find that your reefs are able to recover, what are the things you do at the coast or in the land part that actually helps the reef to recover? So those are, things that they can manage, like pollution, for example, or sediment sources, or improving their livelihoods, not to be too dependent on the fishing, is a very big role of women. And we're seeing that in the things that we've done, like vulnerability assessments, which actually includes assessing the sensitivity of the reefs where they are. If there are reefs in their places, in some cases, they just have mangroves. They don't have coral reefs. So then the work is focused on building, rehabilitating. So there's the huge aspect of women, how they're affected by climate and what they can do to manage their ecosystems better. So I think for me, if I had that elevator speech, it's like really focused on the role of women in the end-to-end, how they're realizing how they're affected by it and what they can do about it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Max, for that very clear recommendation. Much appreciated. Dr. Yenny, any specific recommendation?
I think in terms of fisheries, it is important to recognize the relationship within the fish abundance and the oceanographic distributions. And also it's important to for us to recognize the potential fishing ground, because with potential fishing ground, we can help the fishermen to increase their fish catch and reduce their field costs and also time efficiency. And I think the major step, like I said before, how to increase the fish stocks in the oceans is to reduce, we really need to reduce the fishing pressure in order to increase the capacity of the fish stocks or in order to adapt to the environmental changes. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for that recommendation. Much appreciated. May I perhaps ask Lizzie, do you have any comments on the presentations and or specific recommendations? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, really. I definitely would agree with what's been said. I think there's been some great points made, and a lot of the importance of women leading both science, adaptive projects and adaptation, citizen science projects. It's just been really, they play a really vital role, as many have said today. I think for me, a missing piece we haven't talked a lot about is the role of Indigenous women. I think certainly at the COP, it's really important, and it's really on the agenda now of elevating Indigenous peoples and local communities really leading climate action. And so I think that's something that we should be pushing forward and supporting. I think also, I think when you engage women, you tend to get more holistic solutions that start to link the impacts of climate on human health, on education, and making sure that our projects are more sustainable. So I think that's just another piece that I think is something that women bring to the table. We tend to have longer term solutions that think about the next generation built in. So, but again, I think things like examples like tonight for me, today for you all are just really inspiring, and I think also give us the hope that's so needed. I think there's so much negativity, the climate change, we know the impacts are so significant, and we really need to be spreading these stories of hope and leadership and action. And so I think women play a key role in that as well. Thanks, really.
Thanks so much, Lizzie, for those insights and recommendations. And I think it's indeed so important to highlight the on-the-ground initiatives done by women leaders in those global forums, just to showcase so much is going on and the pivotal role of women leaders within the context of ocean protection and climate change. And I think one of the challenges we face is how we can connect and scale up all these local efforts to regional and global impacts, and that we can also document that accordingly. And one of the other, of course, big discussion points are the other effective conservation measures, OECMs. So that also includes efforts, done by Indigenous people, local communities that are often not integrated in the overall discussion on ocean protection and climate change, while they in effect very much contribute to the SDG goals in worldwide. And also coming back to Marcella's presentation from Papua New Guinea, and also from the women in Raja Ampat, they call them the Waifuna group. I think that's very important to also highlight, traditional marine tenure systems and how we can empower that. CTC is also working on that in the Banda Islands in Maluku, and agree with Lisa's point that those particular initiatives are so key to highlight and empower as they contribute very fast to the goals of countries and worldwide. But I'm extremely inspired by all the speakers. It's great to cover so much ground with those presentations on mangrove protection and restoration and equity distribution of benefits to the very indigenous groups in Raja Ampat working on ocean conservation with support from the Nature Conservancy, and Hesti from CTC highlighting also the pivotal need to really focus on human resources development. We need human resources and capacity to effectively manage marine protected areas moving forward, both from the government, but also at a community level. And what does it take to protect 30% of the oceans in the Coral Triangle is a question we try to address with our partners. And Max shows us, also the power of citizen science and how we can collect data, particularly on, bleaching events. That is such pivotal information to get a sense what's going on, in a country and in the region on bleaching events, and link that to climate change action, but also at the same time raising awareness on climate change issues in the process. And Dr. Jenny highlights such a important issue of climate change and the link to the impact of fisheries and food security. We all know that the world conveyor belts, the currents are influenced by climate change, the migration patterns of fish, and the impact of that, on our food security is so conspicuous that it does warrant urgent action from all of us to address those issues. So thank you so much, everyone, for all your input and excellent presentations. Maybe I can just ask if Dr. Alda or Dr. Gustav are still here. Do you have any final comments for the speakers and the audience? Welcome to say a few last words. Dr. Gustav or Dr. Alda? No? Okay, then we can conclude the webinar with a group photo. Please, if you can all turn your camera.
Thank you, Ibril. I think that's, as I mentioned in my opening speech, that the role of the woman is very important for the CTI, CFF, to have a success ocean governance, especially for these CTI, CFF. So again, thank you very much for this presentation by all speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gustav. We very much appreciate that you could still be with us for the whole session.
Right. Yeah. You're
very much appreciated. And of course, it's a great effort from the regional secretariat and the CT countries to adopt this gender equality social inclusion policy.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So Leilani, can you make the photo of the group?
Yes, okay. Please turn on your videos, request everyone, if you can. Yeah. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Another one as we move to the next group. 1, 2, 3.
Good.
And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lei, and thank you, everyone. We will share the presentations, of course, to everyone, and we will also make a report of the 2 webinars that we can also distribute to all participants and those who have registered. So in total, I think our outreach has been about 60 people in total for each session, so 120 people have registered and showed interest in this particular topic. So thank you so much, Lizzie, also. I know it's late in your place. And everyone, thank you so much, Dr. Gustav, all the speakers and all the participants. Very much appreciated. And have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.